listening to LA40 with Katerina Cozias, only on LA Talk Radio.
All right, good morning, LA. It is Thursday, a little past the hour. You're tuning in for another episode of LA40 with me, your host, Katerina Cozias. And today, I am super excited to bring you another fabulous guest sitting right next to me here for those of you on visual. For those of you on audio, well, you can imagine a really nice-looking guy sitting next to me, Mr. Damon D'Amore.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Hello. Damon is the legacy mentor. He is a gentleman who has spanned the spectrum of life. Our show today is titled Saying Yes to Life. And you, sir, have certainly done that. We're going to go into a little bit of your story. And then what I'd love you to do from the places you've been, and we're talking into the boardrooms of Fortune 100 companies, mentoring CEOs. Hollywood himself became a Discovery Channel host and is now a legacy mentor to the mentors. He is chock full of wisdom, and we are after it.
Thank you. I want to hear what this guy has to say.
There you go. Right, who's this guy? Let's talk to him. Biggest barrier that you see to people not showing up, not coming online for their own life?
I guess two things. One would be not placing enough value on the thing that they're going after. So I tell people all the time, I have clients that they'll miss a meeting or they won't do something. And I say, it's all about your motivation and the value you put on either my time or your own time. Because if I told you, Katerina, if you showed up here in this building at 3 a.m., I give you $1 million, you'll be here at 2:30.
Right.
Like with bells on, right?
Right.
So they don't usually put enough value on the event that they're trying to get to or accomplish. And they're usually not thinking about it in consequences of not doing it. So they need to think about that. The second thing, as we discussed when we first met, was imposter syndrome, which is basically regardless of your expertise or skill level, thinking that you don't deserve the success or the attention or the authority that other people see in you. And it's a big problem for a lot of people. And the higher that folks usually get up in the ladder of either public appearance or corporate, and the bigger their egos, the bigger the imposter syndrome is. So it grows.
That's interesting, because I would assume that the bigger the ego, the bigger the success, that you would be getting over that imposter syndrome feeling. Explain imposter syndrome a little bit for some of the viewers that may not be following where we're headed.
Sure. So say that I'm me, and I've spent lots of time with Fortune 500 CEOs, coaching, working with, et cetera. And I walk into a meeting, and the moment that I walk in, I feel overwhelmed by the authority of the other people in the room. And once I start talking and they're all looking at me without any facial expressions, I'm waiting for them all to say, "Get this guy out of here!" Like,
who's this faker?
Who's this faker? Right. But that's never the case, And it has less to do with people that have imposter syndrome making a checklist of their authority, their skill sets, their experience. And it has more to do with their identity, about how they see themselves in the world, and a lack of a strong ego.
So a lack of a strong ego seems to sound like that should be a good thing. In this case, not so much.
Well, ego, if you're a narcissist, is bad.
Okay.
But there's a lot of healthy aspects of having an ego, a healthy ego. And ego is how you see yourself in relation to the rest of the world when you step back from a third-party perspective. So it's important to say to yourself, oh, I'm Katerina. I exist in this world around me, and I have overwhelming value to provide these people. And you have to
own that.
You have to own that,
right.
like aggressively.
I have a friend of mine, and he's a gentleman. He's in his late 60s, fabulous fellow. And he is in New York this weekend addressing the UN, talking about health and wellness. And this has been his sphere for the bulk of his career. And we were having cocktails last week, and we were talking about this upcoming UN address, which is kind of the biggest thing you can do is address the UN in New York. And he was thinking, I don't know if I'm the one that should be doing it. And I thought, well, if not you, then who? If not you with your wealth of experience, then who? If not you in your 69th year, then who? So it was interesting to me to realize that everyone can suffer from that to some degree.
the first time I did, I was 21. I was working on Wall Street.
Okay.
And I had like my first impulsive trade to do, and everything went wrong. and I had a moment where a whole pit of people were screaming at me, and I thought I was going to get fired. And I froze for a second, and I thought to myself, I don't belong here. Like, I should be in college. I'm 21 years old. What am I doing here? But then immediately I said to myself, you wanted this for years, for the last 5 years. You're here. You made it happen. Are you going to prove everybody right that said you shouldn't be here? And then it was the first time I felt imposter syndrome, and the first time that my ego was like, I deserve to be here as much as or more than anybody else. So when that happened in Hollywood, afterwards Wall Street, doing 2 startups, raising venture capital, being in the rooms with people who, I didn't even graduate college, I have a community college degree, but teaching an MBA class, walking in and thinking that these people are going to laugh at me. You just have to constantly own it and aggressively own it. And there's a phrase that I like called violence of action.
Violence of action.
So the moment that you commit to something, you commit to it as hard as possible. You know, it's like when you're going to swing for a baseball, you're swinging through.
Well, and that was, taking it back to the way that the episode started, when you talked about somebody not having the integrity to show up on time or to show up with that violence of action. What's the point then? Why do people half-ass it? Why would you not just stay home and play on Facebook? Hi, Facebook, by the way. We're streaming live.
Yeah, I tell people all the time who contact me and say, I want to be an entrepreneur. And I say, why? And they list all these reasons for lifestyle, the freedom of choice. And I'm like, those aren't good reasons. Like you go get a job that gives you all that lifestyle, you know? And
so what would you consider a good reason to become an entrepreneur? A driving force reason?
If you wake up every morning for months on end thinking that there's a solution to a problem that people need that only you can solve, you need to go chase that down. And even if it doesn't work out, even if it works out negatively, I've had companies implode, be successful, and then implode. But you learn so much about yourself. And I'm a big fan of therapy. If you're open and if you're into self-discovery and self-awareness, those are the moments when you're going to look back on your life and say, I know who I am related to everybody else. And every day you can look at yourself in the mirror and decide if you're working as hard as you can, and you can be honest with yourself. 80, 90%, no, 100% slacker day.
Right. You got a 2700 exit.
Yeah, a lot of people don't view their lives through a story arc. And I tell people you need to step back, and we do these lifeline episodes. I could even show you a couple where you mark the highs and lows of your life, professionally, personally, what happened and why, and how do you build resilience? Because the lows are going to happen. It's not about preventing lows. It's about realizing what makes you special and resilient. And
resilient to work through that low.
To work through it and step up and take something positive away from it. So when somebody says, oh, you failed at this, it's like, yeah, I did fail at it, but all these other silver linings came out and they helped me to build on this. And my whole career has been about connecting the dots and pulling the positives out of negatives. You
have something here I want to show the audience. No weak shit. Look at that every day, right?
Yeah.
And go 2700x your life. Talk to us a little bit about the life curve arc again.
It's called Lifeline.
The Lifeline.
So you chart from your very...
I'm just making sure my Lifeline is on.
Your pulse is
still okay,
there.
just double checking.
You track your from your very first memory until today, any moment in your life or event that was impactful in a positive or negative way, from a scale of 1 to 10, positive and negative. So you wind up having this chart, green above, red below. And it's fascinating because now mine takes up 2 legal-sized papers because I'm almost 50.
Right, so yours is stretched.
But my students are smaller. But I've had grown adult men and women, CEOs of big companies you would know, do the exercise and then really get upset and almost cry and be like, wow, I thought I was successful, but I've spent most of my life in the red, like under a... And they're just like, what is going on?
Now, is that all power of choice, perception, how we choose to perceive the factual fact?
Well, yes and no. I mean, you can't control a parent dying or something, other horrible event going on, but all you can control is your perception and then how you react to those events. Very Stoic principle. So yeah, like control your perceptions and your reactions, and then you kind of own your reality. You know, you create your authority, you create your reality.
So you create your reality. You went from trade floor, Wall Street, into Fortune 500 companies,
No,
and then
actually,
I was going to say because you played in Hollywood for a little while. I'm trying to
Yeah.
connect these dots.
so I worked on Wall Street from 93 to 98.
Okay.
Uh,
The heyday of Wall Street, actually.
is crazy.
Yeah.
Maybe one person knows what this means, but the yield curve was like 350 basis points. It was just like a money-making
I was going to
machine.
say I'm a finance major, so
Yeah.
I know that period was like hot.
The
Yeah.
password for my computer in the morning was cash cow. So, so I worked on Wall Street in New York, a little bit in London, traded, built trading systems, did a lot of things, got really burned out, gained 100 pounds, had a bunch of horrible vices, blew up my life and relationship. Left to take an unpaid internship in the film business for an independent film company and learned to like be a PA and run around and make coffee and walk dogs.
So you went from Wall Street High to being a personal assistant.
I went from
and getting coffee
from the 105th floor of the World Trade Center to literally running to a bagel truck on 6th Avenue to get some guy his bagels.
and getting bitched at while you were running there.
Yeah.
Right.
Why are you late? Why is my bagel cold?
Now, why? Why? Do you think you consciously imploded your life?
Well, I was there for the wrong reasons. You know.
There in Hollywood? There at Wall Street?
On Wall Street,
Okay.
yeah. Initially, you know, when I was growing up, my parents split when I was really young, and my dad worked on Wall Street. My mom didn't have a career for a number of reasons, and money was kind of used as a tool of violence for us. It like changed our
Control.
lifestyle, changed how everything from safety to neighborhood to schools we went to. So I equated money with freedom, you know, with choice. But then it became more than that. It was like, oh, because I didn't have a relationship with my dad that was really good. I was like, oh, I can make more money than you can on Wall Street if I go there. I can have a family and keep it together. Like I can be everything that you couldn't. So you're there for totally unhealthy reasons.
Right.
And you're 21 and you're making money and you have a massive expense account and you're a shy kid growing up and now you go crazy.
Now
with,
you,
know,
yeah, now you're buying drinks for all the pretty women, you know, yeah.
drinks and everything else.
Right.
So it just became to a point where my whole life was a series of Excel spreadsheets. And I had somebody in my life at that point who was a construction worker, and he got really drunk one Christmas, and he was like, I know you think I'm like a lowly guy or whatever. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, oh, you're on Wall Street, and I like working my hands. And I said, really, if I ask you what you did this year, you could drive me to a physical location and say,
physically show me
I built
something.
this. I was like, I could show you a stack of P&L, which means nothing, literally. So that's when
Profit and loss statements, yeah.
Yeah, so I loved independent film, and I was like, life can't be that bad on that side. So I couldn't get a job because I had no experience or film school. And I was like, what can I do? They said, you can walk the dogs and get bagels. And I was like, great.
Wow.
And I became a producer for a company in New York and produced some commercials and then learned film production and development and then started a production company out here and then moved to reality and produced The Apprentice with our now POTUS. And Undercover Boss.
Yes.
And that's where I started getting into meeting all these CEOs and working very closely one-on-one.
With that was under the Mark Barnett window, right? The Apprentice.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Wow.
Everybody's in the news right now.
Right.
But Undercover Boss was great because
the show Undercover Boss.
The show Undercover
Yeah.
Boss, and I selected the CEOs except for the pilot for the first two
Wow.
seasons. I interviewed them and then submitted them to CBS. But I interviewed about 300 CEOs, and because I wasn't not just a Hollywood guy, I was a business guy.
Right.
There was lots of love and
You could play in their world, right?
Yeah, and they wound up when I left Hollywood doing my first startup, becoming investors, advisors, customers.
Now, did you suffer from imposter syndrome when you moved into the film sphere?
I suffered from imposter syndrome in the film sphere because when I walked into the film company for the first day, everybody looked creative, right? Like they look like creative people,
Right.
and I'm used to wearing a suit every day. And then when I got to reality, after I'd proven myself to be a producer, I'll never forget the first 2 weeks. I was taking notes in meetings.
Right.
What does that mean? What does that mean? And after 2 weeks, I got called into the executive producer's office, and I was like, I'm getting fired. So I started the meeting by apologizing.
Oh,
and I was like, I'm sorry, you gave me a chance. He's like, what are you talking about? I called you in here to tell you you're doing great, and the brands
We're gonna
love
give you a promotion.
Yeah, so imposter syndrome there, imposter syndrome
Wow.
raising money from investors all over the world until I figured out how to get over that. Imposter syndrome even coaching.
Well, and I was going to say, so you've taken a couple of companies and like you said, either VC'd them or bootstrapped them into $1 million worth of net profit within 6 months. So
Yeah.
you're good at what you do. And you seem to be good at everything you try to do, which is interesting.
Good, not great, but yeah.
Well, good enough.
Good enough.
I mean, pretty good.
Businesses fail for a million reasons. Marriages fail. Like I'm a hardcore Taurus, right? So my strength is also my weakness. In
Which
that
is?
I believe that I could put my head through that wall if I needed to. So I'm going to keep doing it. So for business, that's great. For life, not so much. And sometimes for business, I didn't pivot soon enough because I was sure.
Was that ego in play that didn't let you eject when you should have ejected?
A little bit of it was a negative ego thing, but a little bit of it was also, I feel a massive responsibility, even to this day, to people that gave me money, even if it's their job to invest for a living.
To produce for them?
Yeah, I could get to a point right now if I thought hard enough that I would physically feel sick that I lost some certain people money.
So that's a good driver, right? Somebody gives you $500,000, you don't want to lose it.
Fear is a big motivator, and the book that I'm writing is all about that right now, because everybody always asks me for Undercover Boss and Apprentice, what's the biggest success factor? Is it passion or good idea? And the biggest founders that I've ever met that were successful were motivated by fear that they turned into a positive motivator. Fear of going back to the farm, fear of proving their family right, fear of being poor, fear of...
I have a mentor that I work with, and he always reminds me of something brilliant when the fear starts to come into play, because it does, right? We're human. And he says fear is simply the other side of the coin from courage.
Yep.
Figure out how to transmute that fear into courage, and you will find the power to not go back to that farm boy life.
Stephen Pressfield has a great quote where he says, athletes play hurt and warriors fight scared, but you have to go into the fight, right? And one of my best friends did a lot of different things in the military, and the first time we met, he was very open with me, and he told me the first time he actually went to war as a highly trained scout sniper guy. He could hear the battle on the other side of all this commotion going on, and he had a breakdown. He was his lips started quivering, they started crying, and it wasn't just him, it was all these guys, and it's okay, yeah, we're all afraid, but what are we going to do? There's people here depending on us, behind me there's people back home.
Wow.
You step up. So it's the same thing as when the whole trading floor is yelling at you, and you're like, I want to cry and run away, or this can define you.
Well, the same thing happened to me, I'll be honest with you, because for some of the people know my story, but same thing. I had wanted to come to Hollywood from when I was 15, took the mentally safe route, went into finance, did corporate finance for 10 years, knew that I was being called to something different. By the time I made that shift, it was 20 years later, and I showed up in Hollywood with this intention to make it happen. And I went up in front of the first agent that I went to audition in front of, and I bombed like nobody's business. Bombed. And I had just uprooted my entire cushy, beautiful life that I was living in Miami and jet-setting around on yachts and private planes. I'd come out to Hollywood where I don't know anyone, I don't know nothing. And before I even had a chance to unpack my bags, I'm bombing, and I'm thinking all I want to do is grab my bags and just run away. Yeah. But you have to decide that if this is something that's calling you, you got to push through it. You've got to step up. And I mean, it's the best decision I've ever made. I love it now. I love my life.
I always say to myself, I'm like, this is not how my story ends. I get to dictate it, right? And the thing is that whether it was managers or other traders or big producers or big agents, I always did what I said I was going to do, no matter how much I had to suffer for it. So those people became supporters, advocates, investors. And to this day, I could probably still throw a dart at the Fortune 500 list and maybe get a third of those people to call me back same day.
Wow.
And they're book club members with mine. They're hunting trip buddies. They're they come into town for 36 hours, and I'm the guy they have dinner with, hang out with their families. And it's not to brag. It's just that there's so many people who say things because they think they need to, but if you say them because you mean them and you actually have the follow-up, it's very rare in today's world.
My father was a very big proponent of integrity.
Yeah.
And not so much integrity that you, obviously that you show your partner, that you show your business, but the integrity that you show yourself.
Yeah.
You're the one that's getting up in the morning and looking yourself in the mirror. So that was a good lesson to just be built under for.
What I said before about looking in the mirror every day, it's my favorite scene from the first Rocky when in the beginning, he's getting his ass beat by some loser, and he goes home and he sees a picture of himself as a kid, and he looks at himself and he's like, what happened to you? This is not where you're supposed to be, and it's depressing. How did you
I was going to say that it is depressing, and that's why he trained to get.
But he didn't train to win. He even said he trained to prove he could go the distance and be a man and exist in this world amongst other men. A lot of people think, oh, Rocky beat Apollo. No, he didn't beat him. He lost in the first one. Right. But he went the distance, and he proved that he was a man.
Then he became Stallone, worth $450 million. So he's doing something right. How did you move from then working with Mr. POTUS and The Apprentice and all of these great shows to coaching, mentoring?
So it was through starting a number of businesses. After Undercover Boss, I started a small consumer products business with a friend of mine, had a moderate success, but got the business bug back, raised a small venture capital fund to do more consumer product stuff, That's when I hosted the show for Discovery Channel Online. Built that business. A business was born out of that, which you referenced before, that did a whole bunch of revenue, which was wonderful until it all imploded. But from growing and dying a number of businesses and keeping my network expanding, one of the Undercover Boss CEOs reached out to me when my last business imploded, and asked for some help, and I wound up coaching him before I realized coaching. And I said, okay, I'll do it as a favor, but I need to figure out my next startup. And then he referred me to another guy, and before I knew it last year.
To continue coaching and mentoring.
Yeah, I had 14 clients before I knew it.
Never even realized you had started a coaching business.
And I was still resistant because I was...
you were who the heck am I?
Imposter syndrome.
Right?
I said, I didn't sell my company for $1 billion. I didn't go to Harvard. I didn't work for Bain or McKinsey.
I haven't trained with Tony Robbins.
And then all of a sudden, I got a call from the biggest investor that I lost money who I didn't really know, out of the blue. And he said, are you busy? And I said, no, not really. Why? And he said, I need you to coach this guy that I invested in because you're still the best CEO I ever invested in.
Wow.
And I said, no, well, I lost all your money. And he said, you didn't lose it. I know where it went. Like, things go wrong for a million reasons. And I was like, imposter syndrome in the box, gone. Right. And that night, like, I changed my LinkedIn to my new coaching business. And then it was the first time that I put out energy and didn't get like a little bit back. There was an abundance of all these guys and gals I respected who messaged me saying, we've been waiting for this, you're perfect, how can we help, how can we work together? And since then, like, I'm giving an international keynote speech next month, like, everything's been amazing, and I've had to realize that my value is because it's atypical. I had recently a Fortune 50 CEO I was with, and he said, I could hire anybody that worked for a big brand for 20 years and became a coach and learned some system out of a binder, but you have life and professional experiences unlike anybody I know. And while those other folks might serve a key need for me, you serve a different need.
Well, and it goes back to what you said about the arc of life.
Yeah.
You have to go through those valleys to gain the wisdom that you're going to gain in order to then share that wisdom. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make, because with some of the clients that I mentor, is they get stuck in so much self-judgment that the biggest piece that's missing for them is the forgiveness of self.
Yeah.
And the recognition that it hasn't been wrong, it just has been. It's up to you to now take those experiences and shuffle them in a way that is going to add value of some kind.
I'm writing a speech called Legacy and Loss right now, how you can't define your legacy until you've experienced some sort of epic loss. And the point being that when everything fails, I had a point where my business ran out of money. I had to fire everybody. Then the business went under, and then 2 weeks later, my wife left, and everything was just like boom, 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 boom. Where I was at my lowest point ever. But you're looking at this mountain of ash that used to be your life. But what you realize is that in the middle of the mountain of ash, there's like one ember burning, and you're like, what is that thing that I can go build on?
Spark it.
And then that's what you go build on, and that's like the positive takeaway. So if you look at anything from Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, like, you need to go, like, the hero wanders, the hero suffers.
The hero falls into some quicksand, he's got to get out.
Yeah, and then they return with treasure, and they return with treasure because they suffered for it. So, and it's not like, I always tell people, it's one of the chapters in my book, don't have a chip on your shoulder in public, but have a mountain on your shoulder in private. So, you need to believe that you have the biggest ego where you deserve it and you've paid for it and you've suffered for it and other people won't. And part of my daily ritual now that I started a couple years ago is every morning I put myself in like uncomfortable situations where I put my head in a bucket full of ice or whatever. And A is to build resilience and to do something uncomfortable to start the day so everything else is easier. But there's also an element of, I know that 99 of the people I'm going to come in contact with today, I'm stronger than them. Like,
So just working that subconscious mind of, I can do it. Is your book written? Is it out? Is it public?
It's not. It's being written. I actually made a commitment recently to
finish it.
to finish it. I rented a small office space to specifically be writing. So I'm spending time and money away from clients to do it. So I'm hoping to get the draft to an editor by the end of the year, and hopefully by Q1 it's out.
And the title you mentioned that you're thinking of?
The title. Excuse me.
Can we share that?
As of right now, it's called "What Are You Running From?" And the answer is it better be something really big, but and the subtitle is going to be something along the lines of now that you need to define what you want to run to and like how to get there, because it's not just about having this big fear; it's about how to turn it into a positive motivator and how to feed it and how to make other people, or not make, but convince them to become advocates for your cause. Because even as a solo entrepreneur, you have stakeholders, you have listeners and audience members, you have a studio, you have all this stuff. So you need them to be like, yeah, I'm going on this journey with Damon, and I trust him to like take me into the darkness.
And it's so important because we don't realize how much comes from us that we're emitting in terms of the energy stamp that is either repelling people or attracting them to us. And in fact, on that note, I'm going to do a little plug here because it's in line with what we were just talking about. November 10th, for those of you that want to join us, Mr. Jim Lutz and I are running our next seminar, Charisma, Persuasion, and Influence. Charisma, Persuasion, Influence, CPI San Diego, on November 10th, because there is so much you can do if you know how to either align people to you or look at them as a barrier and figure out a way to move them over so that they don't stand as a barrier towards you and the other person. Favorite books of yours, a couple of recommendations for people that may be wanting to change that fear into courage.
Favorite book all time, read it twice, Atlas Shrugged, in regards to work ethic. Favorite tactical book I've read in the last couple of years that all my students and my clients have to read is Essentialism by Greg McKeown.
Essentialism, if you're an entrepreneur.
Which is, or anybody, even corporate folks, the whole premise is that if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will, and how to determine which trade-offs to make. And then I just read a wonderful book by David Morris called The Evil Hours. It's a biography of PTSD and trauma, and it has a lot of applicable takeaways outside of just veterans of PTSD for business and personal journeys, and but those are all wonderful.
You mentioned a morning ritual. Any other tips for the audience to get their day started?
Start off with a small win. So like I hate meditating, but I've learned to do it the last couple of years, and it's become a core part of my routine. So I have a 5-minute minimum. Some days are 15, 18, but I can't go past that. I lose focus. But no matter how bad I feel, I make sure I do the 5 minutes. And it's like, okay, like I knock that out, or I put myself in uncomfortable situations in the morning, just having small wins. A client called me the other day and he said, I had to go to China. All this crazy stuff's going on. I've gotten nothing done. I said, well, the goal that we set for your end of the month is here. There's got to be 10 things below that. Like just do one thing that week so that when you're on the road and you travel 10,000 miles,
you feel like you've done something accomplished.
And because we map it out and they're all actionable binary goals, meaning you either achieve or don't, it's real. It's not like, oh, I think that might help get me towards my goal. It's like, no, we agreed on this, and now
you do this is going to happen.
And you did it.
Yeah. If people want to work with you, if they're interested in reaching out to you, how can they find you? Where do you, I mean, I know where you live, but where do you?
Exactly.
We won't tell the people. How do they find you?
Legacymentor.co. My com is being held hostage by somebody. I'm trying to get it.
$20,000 for the M.
Exactly. For the M.
Damn you, GoDaddy.
And my Instagram for work is Legacy Mentor Official. And every day, because I work mainly with corporate clients or like hyper-scaling startups, I carve out 3 aspirational clients every quarter who are individuals who need a lot of help. Okay. But I post every day on Instagram quotes from books, articles, my own stuff, and some of them are mini book reviews. So it's things that I'm sharing with my clients that you can access.
I was going to say Legacy Mentor Official.
Official on Instagram.
And I am a follower, and it's awesome because it'll just come into your feed. We've got to be very cautious and conscious of what we allow into our world. And if you're tired of being bombarded by what a lot of society is telling you should be doing and watching and saying and reading and thinking about, and you want to actually be conscious about what it is, follow this guy on IG.
Well, you know this as an entrepreneur and a media personality. I've had social media folks reach out to me and say, oh, you should be having daily inspirational quotes, blah, blah, blah. And the stuff they list is like what any other Inc., Gary V, whatever. It's like I can see that quote from Seth Godin anywhere on the internet. Like you're not going to see a quote, by some guy that got his legs blown off in Afghanistan about resilience and how he turned it into a positive motivator for business or whatever, or or anything. Like
that's why it's a good one, because it's not stuff that you've normally read through. And there's that quote again by Louise Hay for the 50th time.
Never.
So.
Maybe a picture of my dog once in a while.
Damon, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us. It's fun.
It's a fun little show.
I wish we had like 3 hours like Joe Rogan.
Well, I was going to say, when we decide to just continue with the global domination that we're about, It's going to be all about you. It is actually all about you at home, and we thank you for watching. If you're tuning in via Facebook, amazing. Thank you, Mark Zuckerberg, for connecting us all. And if you are tuning in via latalkradio.com, well, then great for you. Thank you for supporting the channel. Again, our guest, Damon D'Amore. I am your host, Katerina Cozias. It is a beautiful day. Go live it, and we'll see you again next week. Bye.
You're listening to LA40 with Katerina Cozias, only on LA Talk Radio.